Hey everyone, Kevin P. McAuliffe here for Doddle TV, and I'm back again with another Adobe's After Effects tutorial. In this lesson, we're going to continue our discussion of our introductory look at After Effects by talking about another exceptionally important aspect of getting up and running as quick as possible, and I'm talking about text, because obviously text is probably going to be a major component in all of your work. And in this lesson, I'm going to show you not only how you can create text quickly and easily, I'm going to show you how you can get in and style it, and then what I'm going to do is show you how you're going to animate it very quickly, but I'm going to show it to you in a little bit of a different way than how we talked about animating in our last lesson. In our last lesson, we talked about getting in and animating specifically with keyframes. In this lesson, I'm going to show you how you can get in and animate with some built-in text presets that you might not even know are there. And then we're going to wrap things up by talking about path text, how you can quickly and easily create path text or text on a path, and how you can animate it. Okay, short introduction here. Let's just get into Adobe's After Effects and let's get started. Okay, so let's Command and Tab into Adobe's After Effects, obviously an Alt and Tab for all my Windows friends out there. And before we get started, you'll remember from our previous lesson, we need to create a new composition to house our text. So let's do that. All I'm going to do is simply come down here, click on the Create New Composition button. In this case, it really doesn't matter the size of the composition I'm creating. You'll remember that we have our preset drop down right here. And why don't I just select a very basic HDTV 720p, and I'm just going to create it being 23,976 frames per second. I'm simply going to say OK, and here is our timeline. Of course, you'll see we have a green bar here because we really don't have anything in our timeline. But let's get in and let's put some text into our composition. Now, how we put text into our composition is very simple. What I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate up to the text tool. Now, something else that I should point out about the toolbar at the top here is that you're going to notice that we have a whole bunch of tools at our disposal. Some of the tools you're going to notice have a little arrow in the lower right-hand corner, meaning that if I click on that icon, we're actually going to be given more options of things that we can do with that specific tool. In this case, the text tool. Now the standard text tool, if I just click on it, I navigate over to my composition window. I'm just going to click anywhere, even right up here, and I'm just going to type my name in, Kevin, just like that. What I'm going to do is just reposition the text here by simply switching over to the selection tool, or the shortcut for it is V on the keyboard, V on both Mac and Windows. Now you'll see that I have the caps lock key on, which disables the refresh in After Effects, so I'm just going to turn that off. And again, with our selection tool selected, I can just grab the text and move it really wherever I want it to go. Now, of course, because I don't have any keyframes in here, I don't have to worry about this position being keyframed. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put the text right here in the middle of the screen. Now, I did mention that there were some more options for text because we have that little arrow in the lower right-hand corner of our text tool. You'll notice that if I hover over the text tool, that I'm being told that this is the horizontal type tool. What I'm going to do is simply click and hold, and you're going to notice that I have the vertical type tool as well. So what's the difference? Well, the horizontal type tool types out pretty much like I just showed you. The vertical type tool, and I'll just type my name again here. I'm just going to type in Kevin, just like such, and you'll see that it actually creates it vertically, not like before where it created it horizontally. Now, I'll be honest with you, I really never, ever use the vertical type tool. I've just never had a need to use it, but if you do need to use it, you obviously have it at your disposal right there. So what I'm going to do is just delete this layer. Now, of course, you're going to notice that as I'm creating new text layers, those layers are appearing down here in my composition. Now, there's something else that I do want to mention, and I'm actually going to right click. I'm just going to import some footage here. It doesn't even really matter. I'm just going to pick one of my motocross files. I'm simply going to say, okay, I'm just going to drag this and drop this into my composition right here. And what I want to point out is I want to point out this little crosshairs that we have in the middle of the screen, because you're going to notice that inside of a clip, that crosshairs appears right dead in the center of my video image. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, Kev, why would you be pointing that out? Well, the reason that I'm pointing that out is because you'll notice that if I delete that video clip and I select my text again, that same crosshairs is actually at the bottom of my text that I created. So what exactly is that little crosshairs? Well, that crosshairs represents the anchor point. Now, as we go along, we're going to be talking more about the tools at the top of our project window. But the anchor point is something that's very important to point out. So the anchor point basically represents the point on your image or your text where things are going to rotate around. Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm just going to hit R for rotation. I'm just going to grab the rotation value and I'm just going to rotate it. And take a look at the way the text is rotating. Right now it's rotating around the anchor point. So of course the big question is, how do we adjust the anchor point? Well, there's two ways that you can do it, the long way and the short way. I'll show you the long way first. All I'm going to do is simply select the text. I'm going to hit A on the keyboard, A obviously for anchor point on both Mac and Windows. And I'm just going to adjust the Y anchor point. Now you'll see that as I'm doing that, what's actually happening is the text is moving here to basically center itself up in the anchor point. But that's actually not normally the way that I do it. Normally I have the text pretty much where I want the text to be, and what I want to do is just grab that anchor point and move it. Most people think that you can just grab it and drag it, but you can't because you're adjusting the position. But up here we have another tool called, appropriately enough, the pan behind, in brackets, anchor point tool. All I'm going to do is simply select that. I can now grab the anchor point and move it to wherever I want it to go to. So this way our rotation can actually work exactly the way that it should. Okay? Very cool. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change my text. Now, what's important to keep in mind here is that with the text, right over here on the right-hand side, we have our text or our character window. Now, if you don't happen to have the character window there, no problem. All I'm going to do is simply navigate up to Window. You'll see it right here, Character, or the shortcut Command and 6 on the Mac, Control and 6 on Windows. And the very first option we have over here is, of course, what text are we going to use? What actual typeface? And I'm just going to type in Impact. I normally like to use Impact, just when I'm doing demos, only because it just makes the text very easy to read. Okay? Now, depending on the font that you pick, you might have some options in there, like having a bold version and italics version. You can actually get to all those options right here underneath Impact. You'll see we can set the font style. Now, in this case, Impact only has a regular, but if I was happening to choose a font like Arial, okay, you're going to notice that Arial does have a narrow. It also does have an italic and a bold. And of course a bold, italic, and a black, but we don't need to get into all those, but you sort of get where we're going with this. Now for the purpose of what we're doing, maybe I'll just stick with Arial Black because that's another very thick font. Okay. The next option we have over here is our fill color. Fill, fairly self-explanatory. That's the color that's actually making up the text. Now what I'm going to do, just for argument's sake right now, is I'm going to make the text black, and you'll see that the text really disappears in general. But the text actually hasn't gone anywhere, because what's important to keep in mind is that with nothing behind my text, the background is actually transparent. We've just chosen to choose the background color that we see as black, and you'll remember that if I come into the composition settings, we set that right here. If I switch that to something else, like red, you're going to notice that the text appears right away. But believe it or not, we don't have to change the background to be red to see the text. What we actually need to do is just navigate to this icon right here that's going to toggle the transparency grid on and off. So if I needed to see this black text on a black background, remember, anything that's checkerboard, if we were to render this out with a key or an alpha channel, this would be keyable over top of footage in any nonlinear editing application you happen to import that file into, whether it's Final Cut Pro 10, Media Composer. You're good to go with the key. Okay. Now I just chose black just for the purposes of showing that to you. What I'm going to do is just double click on the text. Let's just pick a color to make it stand out, something like yellow. Okay, that really stands out against the black. Okay, so let's move on and let's talk about a few of the parameters that we can adjust inside of the character window other than just the actual font and the font style. Really the main thing that you're going to be adjusting in here is the size of the font, just like such. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type my name out here again. I'm just going to hit enter. I'm just going to type in Kevin, just so that I have two of them. Okay. The reason that I wanted to do that is because the next option is one that I always have sort of a little bit of a chuckle with, because I always ask people what this is actually called. I'm just going to navigate right over here. I'm going to hover the mouse over it. It says set the, and most people refer to that as leading. Set the leading. We're not setting the leading, we're setting the leading. Now the question is, why is it called leading? Now what I actually need to do here is to select my text so that you can see that the leading is actually the space in between the two lines of text. Because back in the days when you had printing presses, how would you separate the lines of text? You would put a piece of lead in between the lines to set your spacing in between them. So that's why it is referred to as leading and not leading. Okay. The next option we have right below is called the tracking. You'll see the tracking is to space the letters out. Now one thing I do also want to point out here is that, and I'm going to just delete the second line of Kevin here, is that in some cases, depending on the font that you've chosen, you might need to get in and adjust the spacing because, Arial's got a pretty good spacing in between the font here. Now, let me just pick a different one here. See if we can sort of show you a little bit of something that might not be ideal. We'll just go with this one for now. You're going to notice that the space in between the I, the V and the I and the N is different. It's a lot less here than it is here. So what if I wanted to actually reduce the space between the I and the N? Well, we can actually get in and adjust the kerning, which is what it's referred to, between each letter by simply selecting the space in between the two letters that we want to adjust the kerning in between. I'm simply going to hold Option on the Mac, Alt on Windows, and I'm going to use the left and right arrow keys to actually get in and adjust the kerning exactly the way that I want. Of course, I can select anywhere and do that as well. Very cool, okay? And you'll actually see that as I'm making that adjustment, the kerning is actually being adjusted right here. This option doesn't become available when you have the entire text selected because you need to get in between each individual letter to set the kerning, okay? Now, the next option is one that not a lot of people know of. I'm just going to select this because a lot of people look at this, they don't even know what this icon means. Well, this is to set the stroke. Now, you're going to notice up here that we have two colors. Obviously, we have yellow and then we have white. The yellow represents the fill color. The white represents the stroke color. Now, what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to change that stroke color to be red. And you'll notice that as soon as I do that, as soon as I make that adjustment, we now have something that's slightly different here. What I'm going to do is just put this back the way that we had it. Okay? You're going to notice a very, very thin red line around my text because the instant that I altered this color, our stroke value of 1 was added. Now, of course, what I need to do is to select all the text again. I'm just going to grab that and I'm just going to extend that out. This is a way to add a very thin border, or what's referred to more commonly as a stroke, around our letters. And you'll see that we could choose between a stroke over fill or even fill over stroke, just like that, and even all fills over all strokes and all strokes over all fills, okay? In most cases, you're just going to leave it as stroke over fill, just like such. And of course, we can make this as big as we want, as thin as we want, or even not even have it at all, okay? But it's just a great additional feature to have in here. We also have the ability to get in, stretch our text if we need to, okay? And then there's one of my favorite that not a lot of people know why they would ever use, the baseline shift. I'm going to give you a perfect example of where you would use baseline shift. And I see this question get asked all the time. Okay? What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to zoom back here on my composition here. There we go. And I'm going to type out a date for you. Let's type out Christmas. This is December 25th with a TH. Now this font doesn't seem to have any numbers. That's okay. We're just going to type in Arial. Okay. And we'll just do Arial. Let's just set the whole thing to be Arial Black here. Okay, I'm just going to select all, call this Arial Black. There we go. Okay. And I'm just going to shrink the size down a little bit just so that it fits actually in our window here. Now, what you'll see a lot of people say is, okay, well, what I'd like to do is I'd like to take that TH and shrink it down and put it right up here at the top of the 25. So you have sort of 25th, as you see it commonly written. Well, this is where the baseline shift is going to come in handy. What we're going to do is take the TH and we're just going to shrink it down as much as we think we might need it to be. Let's just say to about there. We'll just pick an arbitrary size. That's fine. Well, most people, what they would do in a lot of cases is they would duplicate this layer. They would delete December 25th off, or December 25 off 1 and keep the TH and just reposition TH. That's already too much work. We don't need to do that much work. Okay. All I'm going to do is I'm simply going to select those two letters. I'm going to use the baseline shift to shift them right up to the top, just like such. Of course, you got to get it so that everything kind of lines up right across the top. So we'll get, pretty darn close here, kind of like that. And now we have this looking a lot more proper, okay? Now what we can also do, which is also very cool, is that if you need your font to be just a little bit bolder than maybe the bold version of it, or just a little bit more italicized than the italics version of the font, or maybe it just needs to be an ever so slight adjustment to the boldness, you can do what's called a faux bold, an ever so slightly bolded version of the font. You can do the same thing with a faux italics, just like that. One that I like here is the all caps. In case you got into a situation where, let's just say you typed in, December with ECEMBER as lowercase, the client said, hey, you know what? You've typed out 50 lines of text, but I'd really like to have it all capital. Oh, okay, no problem. I'm just going to select everything, just do an all caps just like that, and now all of my letters, whether they're lowercase or uppercase, will be all caps. Okay, so that's really what I wanted to get in and show you inside of the character window. Now I want to move on and I want to talk a little bit about creating some cool animations right off the bat using some great built-in presets. Okay, now to find the animation presets for text is very simple. Now before I do that, what I'm going to do is just double click on my text to select it, because we obviously want to tell After Effects what we're going to apply this text animation to. Now all I need to do is simply navigate to the animation dropdown. I'm going to come down to Browse Presets. What's going to happen now is that the Adobe Bridge is going to launch. Now if you don't have the bridge installed, don't worry. You can simply navigate up to your Creative Cloud, or if you happen to be on Windows, down to the bottom to where your Creative Cloud suite of applications is installed to. And you can simply find the bridge in here and install it. It'll probably take a matter of minutes to install. Once inside the bridge, you're going to notice that we're now inside of the After Effects 2015 folder in the Presets folder. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to navigate to the, appropriately enough, the text folder. I want to animate my text coming in, so I'm simply going to select Animate In. And now all I need to do is to simply select any one of the animation presets. And what's going to happen is, the first one always takes a second or two to load up. You'll see, there we go. I can now select any one of these presets to work with inside of my Adobe After Effects project. Now why don't I just choose something like Decoder Fade In? Why not? What I'm going to do is, once I have it selected, I'm simply going to double click on it and my text is going to disappear. Now you'll remember from the last lesson where we talked about keyframing, I can press U on the keyboard to see exactly what's happened here. We'll take a look at that. We now have 2 keyframes added, and if I hit the space bar, there is that animation now happening just like such. Very cool. Okay? Now what's also very cool is that you'll remember that I did my faux, or my all caps on my text, and you'll see that the decoder knows that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to switch my text back to be upper and lowercase here, just so that you can see when we animate it in, it's going to look a little something like that. Very cool. A complex animation that was made super simple by just simply using my animation presets. Okay, now there's one last thing that I want to talk about before we wrap this lesson up, and I'm just going to show this to you. I'm just going to undo what I just did with the text there. There we go. We're just going to set everything back the way we had it before. And I want to show you how simple it is to put text on a path inside of Adobe's After Effects. Okay, so to create text on a path, we actually need to have a path first. And we're going to create a very basic path, because in the next lesson, we're actually going to talk about masking. And masking and paths is a very similar idea, very similar concept. And to create a path, what we're going to do is we're simply going to navigate up to our rectangular tool. I'm going to click on it and hold it, because you'll see again, we have that little drop down. And I'm just going to choose, let's choose an ellipse tool. And what I'm going to do is, on this layer, I'm just going to draw a circle. And what it's actually going to do is it's going to mask that layer out. And that's okay. I don't mind if it does that. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to turn the mask off. Right now, you'll see it's set to add. I'm just going to set that to be none. Okay. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come to my text. I'm just going to twirl everything up. I'm going to twirl everything down. And you're going to see that I do have the option for path options. I'm simply going to twirl that down. It wants to know what the path is. I'm going to tell it that the path is mask 1. And now that text is actually attached to the path. I'm just going to reverse that path. And let's just, bring the size of our text down just a little bit here. Now, of course, I'm going to take the 25th off, just because then we start getting into double adjustments here. So I'll just type in TH again here. Okay, we'll just go 5TH. There we go. And what we want to do is just shrink our text down a little bit, because what we can do now is simply deselect our text. I'm just going to grab that first margin and start twirling it. And guess what we now have? We now have our text animating on a path. And of course, what's important to keep in mind is this path doesn't need to be a closed path. What I mean by that is I could draw a path, sort of like, hills, where the text is going to travel up and down that path. And what's also important to keep in mind here, I'm just going to put this back at 0. We'll just set that to be our first margin. Let's come down to the end here. Let's just drag it down just to create an animation here. Of course, if I turn motion blur on right here, we're also going to get some realistic looking motion blur on that text. And of course, at any time I can simply hit the space bar. And there's my text animated on a path. Okay, now I think I'm going to show you one last thing before I wrap this up. Something that's very cool inside of Adobe's After Effects. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create some new text here. I'm just going to delete this. Let's create some text. New composition. I'm just going to leave everything the way that it is. I'm simply going to say OK. Let's type some text. Let's type in, let's just type in After Effects. Why not? Okay. what I'm going to do with this After Effects text is we're going to bring it right over here. I'm going to use the impact font for it. Okay. We're going to increase its size. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create real 3D extruded text inside of After Effects. After Effects does have the capability to do that. And now your mileage is going to vary based on your graphics card. So please keep that in mind. I just want to show you how you're going to go through and actually create the actual 3D extruded text. It's very simple. There is something that we have to change in our composition settings. I'm going to hit Command and K on the Mac, Control and K on Windows. We're going to navigate to the Advanced tab. And right here under Renderer, where it says Classic 3D, I'm going to change that to be Ray Trace 3D. Now you're going to get an alert right away saying that the Ray Trace 3D render enables extrusions and bevels on text and shapes. We'll get into shapes in a later lesson. Reflections, rarefactions. The following features are not rendered by the Ray Trace 3D render, like blend modes, track mats, layer styles, and things like that. That's okay. I'm simply going to say okay, and I'm going to say okay. Now nothing has really happened here, and if I come to my text and I drop it down, we still have the text option, we still have the transform option, because I haven't made this text 3D yet. As soon as I make the text 3D, you're going to notice that I now have two new options, geometry and materials. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the geometry option and I'm going to twirl that down, and you're going to notice that the very first option we have is the bevel depth, second is the whole bevel depth, and most importantly is the extrusion depth. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to set that to be something like 50. Now again, what's important to keep in mind is that, again, like I said, your mileage will vary based on your graphics card. You'll see that it extruded the text very quickly. The only problem is it really looks awful. Why does it look awful? Well, because what's important to keep in mind is that my text is very flat right now because there's no lighting in the scene. Once we get into 3D extrusion, this is now a 3D scene that's going to require some light. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add one light to the scene. I'm going to press Command, Option, Shift, and L, Control, Alt, Shift, and L for all my Windows friends out there. I'm just going to pick a light. We're just going to use the color as being white. We'll just use point as the type of light, and I'm simply going to say OK. And as soon as I do, my text now looks 10 times better than it did before, and you'll see that this text actually does look like true 3D extruded text inside of Adobe's After Effects. Very, very cool and very quick and very simple to create. I wanted to throw that in there right at the end just to show you the real power of the text tool inside of After Effects. But again, we're going to talk more about advanced text techniques in later lessons. Okay, so that wraps up our look at basic text inside of Adobe's After Effects. So now you have the ability to get in, not only create text very quickly, you can get in, add cool things like strokes, and even animate text on a path, and you can get in and not have to worry about trying to create complex animations with your text, because you can use the power of text animation presets to get you up and running lightning quick. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments, if you have any tutorial requests, you can send them to kevinpmcauliffe@gmail.com. This has been Kevin P. McAuliffe. Thanks a lot for watching.